about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's Balls in the build about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King.
the house and stuff, right? And then the guy starts even saying, like, I told my friends, I told them, but none of them believe me. But watch when I show them this video.
Bájale, bájale. Bájale, 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 bájale. Bájale, 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 bájale. ¿Escuchaste? Soy bien macho, ¿eh? ¿Viste cómo soy hija?
Nah.
No te espantes, no te espantes.
Bro.
Y la banda no me cree. La banda piensa que es pura broma. Mis amigos estamos aquí cenando.
Is that? Why did the cries match? Like, bro,
you didn't even finish the video either.
Bro, the cries literally match like the same cry tone as nah, bro. I'm not gonna lie, guys. Every single time we record this fucking segment, bro, some weird shit happens in my fucking house, bro.
There was some weird.
She almost died after holding in her farts. In 2022, 19-year-old Irish woman Cara Clark was rushed to the hospital with crippling stomach pain that left her barely able to stand. Doctors quickly determined that she needed an emergency appendectomy, but what they found shocked everyone. For years, Cara had been holding in her farts around her boyfriend, too embarrassed to let any slip out. Over time, all that trapped gas created extreme internal pressure, causing a very dangerous buildup in her intestines. The constant strain triggered a severe infection, turning what she thought was just polite behavior into a life-threatening medical emergency. Had she waited any longer, doctors said the infection could have ruptured her intestines or even spread throughout her body, leading to certain death. Cara's bizarre ordeal became a viral reminder that our bodies aren't designed to hold everything in, and sometimes it's healthier and literally life-saving to let it rip. Her story isn't funny, it's a warning. Embarrassment can kill you if you're not careful. So, moral of the story is, never hold in your farts.
A woman and 3 children were just found shot to death inside of a car in West Haven, Utah, literally right down the road from me, and I am at a loss for words. This is supposed to be a safe community, but with the murder of Gavin Peterson and now this, I just don't know anymore. So at around 10 p.m. on Tuesday night, the Weber County Sheriff's Office received a phone call from someone in a West Haven neighborhood. When police arrived, they found the bodies of a 32-year-old woman and 3 young kids, a 4-year-old boy and a 2- and 1-year-old girl, and they had all been shot to death. And according to authorities, they were all beyond help. The identities of the victims have not been released yet, but according to a neighbor, it was the father of the 32-year-old woman who found them all dead in a parked car in the driveway. He then was the one who called the police. According to police, investigators have not yet determined if the deaths are homicides, and so far there are no suspects, and no facts point to there being a threat to the public. Authorities haven't confirmed much, but they did confirm that a handgun was found inside the car and that the shootings occurred inside the vehicle. We still don't know what the relation is between the woman and the 3 kids, as a neighbor has come forward and said that the ages and genders of the kids who were killed don't match the age and gender of the woman's kids. Investigators are processing the evidence found inside the car and home, and they're currently going through security footage to see how long the car was sitting in the driveway and when the shots could have been fired. Until the autopsies are complete, authorities won't release any new information, but they did say that the area is an active crime scene, so stay away if possible. According to the neighbor, the family had recently moved back to the area, and they were described as the sweetest family ever. They would usually have Sunday family dinners and would often knock on this neighbor's door to offer them a plate of food. food. This is such a sad and scary story, and the fact that this happened so close to me is heartbreaking. It's also literally just across the way from where 12-year-old Gavin Peterson died at the hands of his dad, stepmom, and older brother. This community is just going through it, so please just check on your neighbors and be kind to each other. If you have any information on the recent shootings in West Haven, please contact the number on the screen.
The only thing that could possibly be worse than your 7-year-old daughter being stabbed to death is the perpetrator being your other child. It was the 28th of September 2024 in Taylor in Michigan. 7-year-old Jessie Lilburn lived in the area with her mom, her dad Jason, and her 13-year-old sister. Jessie was nicknamed JJ by her loved ones, and she was an absolute ray of sunshine. She was such a little sweetheart, and she was a real outdoorsy girl. She always wanted to be out in nature and riding her bike. She just had this real kind of active spirit. On the day in question, her parents had wanted to just pop out for an hour at around 11:15 a.m. to do some errands. They felt that their oldest daughter was responsible enough at the age of 13 to watch her sister just until they got home. The girls had had sort of, their typical sisterly arguments, but nothing major, nothing violent. They'd never sort of actually got physical with each other, and they generally got on well. Jessie's parents had no idea that they'd never see their daughter alive again. At around 1 p.m. that day, police got a horrifying call. The 13-year-old was on the phone, and it sounded like something horrendous had unfolded at the family home. Officers rushed to the scene and found an absolute bloodbath, and Jessie was dead. She'd been stabbed with a butcher's knife over 10 times. This was an absolute frenzied attack. After talking to the older sister, it transpired that she had seemingly killed her over an argument about flushing the toilet. Police claim that the teenager seemed totally emotionless when recalling the events that took place. She had allegedly found a note in the bathroom of her younger sister telling her to make sure to flush the toilet. A scuffle had broken out between the pair of them, and the older sister had apparently then gone back
about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's boss in the building.
With that, her mum has called what her oldest daughter did pure evil, and she's been charged with premeditated murder.
Guy Pearce, I've now read the comments that you made about me, and while I would have preferred...
So Kevin Spacey's back in the media trying to act like he never did anything wrong. So let me just remind you of a few of the things that he's accused of doing. Back in 2017, an actor named Anthony Rapp testified that at a party in 1986, Kevin Spacey, who at the time was 27 years old, made a move on him when he was just 14. And when those allegations dropped, so many more followed. There were allegations from a Boston anchorwoman named Heather Unruh, who claimed that Kevin Spacey sexually assaulted her own son. Then there was filmmaker Tony Montana, who said that he was left with PTSD for 6 months after Kevin Spacey unexpectedly and without consent grabbed his crotch. There's also actor Robert Cavazos, who came forward and said that he had been touched by Kevin Spacey. And Robert also stated that all the young men that surrounded Spacey knew that at some point they'd probably be harassed by him. Then he was accused of sexual misconduct by 8 different staff members of the show House of Cards he worked on, and at this point the floodgates really opened. Police departments across the world, from the United Kingdom to Los Angeles, California, started looking into past reports about Kevin Spacey. In LA, he was investigated for a sexual assault that allegedly happened in 1992. Then another lawsuit was filed that he assaulted a masseuse at his home in 2016, and I could go on and on and on. But Kevin's had some good luck. A number of the charges against him have been dropped. People have withdrawn their lawsuits, and a number of the people who have come forward to speak about him have died mysterious and sudden deaths. But just because Kevin Spacey has never been actually convicted of one of these crimes, that doesn't mean that he's not guilty of them. This whole thing essentially has boiled down to his word versus theirs. And I'm the type of person that always believes victims, especially when you work like me in exposing pedophile rings and these pedophile predators. You always start out believing the victims and then work backwards. And if there wasn't any truth to any of these allegations, why would they have been brought up in the very first place? I mean, there's also the fact that you have to bring up here that Kevin Spacey was known to be friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He's tried to go on shows and deny it, but he's on the flight logs. So yeah, it's horrible because Kevin Spacey is indeed a great actor and he's been in some of my favorite films. But it absolutely sickens me to see people defending him when there is so much evidence of the things that have happened. And we just can't let people like this fool us into thinking that they're completely innocent. I just can't believe that those are some of the comments that I've been reading about Kevin Spacey when it's very, very clear that this guy is a pretty bad dude. And that's saying it very, very lightly.
He turned the cartel's victims into soup. Santiago Mesa Lopez, known as the Stew Maker, worked for one of Mexico's most brutal cartels during their violent war with their rival group. His sole job was horrifying: to make bodies disappear. Using large industrial drums, Santiago would mix a caustic brew of water, lye, and other corrosive chemicals into this boiling concoction, and he would then dump the dismembered bodies of murdered rivals, letting them dissolve for hours until only a sludge of smudged tissue and small bone fragments remained. It was a gruesome, methodical process that erased almost all physical evidence of the cartel's mass killings. While the cartel waged its bloody war above ground, Santiago was deep in the shadows, cooking the dead, turning human bodies into unrecognizable stew. On average, Santiago claimed he disposed of 30 to 50 bodies a month. Sometimes the process took just a few hours. Other times it took an entire day, depending on the victim's size. In total, it's believed he dissolved over 1,000 people during his years of service. For this unimaginable work, Santiago earned just $600 a week. When he was finally arrested in 2009, he chillingly admitted his role without emotion. His capture stunned the nation and brought horrifying clarity to the thousands of missing persons cases haunting Mexico. Families desperate for answers hoped Santiago could tell them what happened to their loved ones. But most bodies had already been reduced to nothingness.
Do you remember the story of the girl with the green ribbon?
Does she have a green ribbon around her neck?
Yeah.
It's like I vaguely remember it.
Once there was a girl named Jenny.
I remember
she was
this.
like all the other girls except for one thing. She always wore a green ribbon around her neck.
I remember this shit.
There was a boy named Alfred in her class. Alfred liked Jenny, and Jenny liked Alfred. One day he asked her, "Why do you wear that ribbon all the time?" "I cannot tell you," said Jenny, but Alfred kept asking, "Why do you wear it?" And Jenny would say, "It is not important." Jenny and Alfred grew up and fell in love. One day they got married. After their wedding, Alfred said, "Now that we are married, you must tell me about the green ribbon." "You still must wait," said Jenny. "I will tell you when the right time comes." Years passed. Alfred and Jenny grew old. One day Jenny became very sick. The doctor told her she was dying. Jenny called Alfred to her side. "Alfred," she said, "now I can tell you about the green ribbon. Untie it, and you will see."
The household was pretty tense, with a lot of regular arguments that the neighbors could hear. The day in question, Nicholas actually rang his brother to ask for a lift home from playing basketball. But Jason explained to him, "Sorry, Mum's in bed. She's kind of preparing for a night shift. She's just getting some sleep, so you're going to have to walk home." And his brother must have absolutely beaten himself up about this, because from that point on, Nicholas vanished. But when the family tried to report him missing, police just weren't concerned. Now, it's not clear whether police sort of just turned a blind eye because this was a troubled kid. He was in trouble with police. They kind of maybe just thought that he'd run off or he'd got himself into trouble and he'd be back. But the family were obviously really distressed by this. They just wanted their child back. But months and months went on with no sign of Nicholas. Then something incredibly strange happened. The September that year, Jason rang police. He said that he'd seen his missing little brother trying to break into the family garage. He said that his brother had then spotted him and just run off. But when police arrived at the family home, there was kind of no evidence that anybody had ever been there at all, and certainly no evidence that anyone had tried to break into the garage. Jason, by this point, had obviously been really struggling with the fact that his brother had disappeared, and he fell into using substances himself. So police speculated whether, Jason had just sort of seen something that wasn't actually there. Maybe he was taking substances. Either way, it felt like the family were back at square one. They'd kind of had this hope, and then all of a sudden it had just been snatched away. The case turned cold and years went by. And like I said, Nicholas's brother Jason had really been struggling with addiction and ended up in rehab. Then in October 1997, there was a breakthrough. Police received a call that Nicholas had been found. He was alive and well and was wandering the streets of Spain. Now, it appeared that Nicholas had escaped from a child S ring, and obviously his family were over the moon that he was back. They just couldn't wait to be reunited after 3 years of not knowing what had happened to him. His sister immediately got on a plane to go and visit her missing brother. Obviously, Nicholas couldn't actually get back to the US because he didn't have a passport at this point. And when the pair were reunited, Nicholas's sister was obviously overjoyed, but he just seemed pretty hesitant. He had sunglasses on, he was kind of visibly nervous, but she was almost just putting this down to the fact that he'd been through a lot of trauma. She kind of didn't want to push him, ask too many questions or anything. She didn't want to make him feel uncomfortable. She was just desperate to get him home. So an emergency passport was arranged for him and the flight was scheduled to get him back. And his mum was ecstatic to have her son back. She embraced him when the pair met finally. They told each other they loved each other, but she just noticed that Nicholas was very, very nervous. His eyes seemed to be quite a lot lighter than they were before, and his ears also seemed a little bit different. It wasn't long before Nicholas's mischievous nature reared its head again. He ended up stealing one of the family cars and being arrested by police, but police almost just kind of figured he's been through a lot of trauma, we'll just let him off because of all of the stuff he's been through. Maybe he's just struggling to cope. It wasn't until late 1997, months after they'd taken Nicholas back in, that a private investigator grew suspicious of him. Now, he'd been working with a TV crew who'd been filming the family, and he just noticed that Nicholas's ears weren't exactly what they were like prior to his disappearance, and he'd only been gone for 3 years, so they couldn't have surely changed that much. In February 1998, the FBI obtained a court order to take the man's fingerprints and DNA. They wanted to prove once and for all that this was missing Nicholas. But it actually did the opposite. It proved it was not Nicholas. It was an imposter called Frederick Borden. He was actually a 23-year-old, not a 16-year-old boy. He'd made the whole thing up and completely tricked this grief-stricken family. For years, he had conned himself into foster homes, orphanages, schools, and kids' hospitals, using different names and different sob stories. He said he was looking for a family to love him. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison, and the real Nicholas has still never been found. But tragically, shortly after, Jason passed away from an OD, and some think the guilt of what happened to his little brother was just too much to bear.
I can guarantee you that you will never hear of a more bizarre missing person case than this, because not only did this little boy just vanish off the face of the earth, but 3 years later, a 23-year-old French man claimed to be him and even lived with the family for months. And for some reason, they actually thought that this man was their missing little boy, despite looking and sounding nothing like him. This is the mysterious disappearance of Nicholas Barclay and the imposter who claimed to be him, Frederick Borden. This is truly so bizarre, and I cannot stop thinking about it. So let's talk about it. Nicholas Barclay was 13 years old when he mysteriously disappeared on June 10th, 1994. He was last seen playing basketball at a park with some of his friends in San Antonio, Texas, and this park wasn't very far away from his home. But that afternoon, Nicholas called his mom for a ride home, only she wasn't the one who answered. It was his older half-brother named Jason. Jason was in his 20s at the time and lived with Nicholas and their mom. At this point, their mom was still asleep as she worked graveyard shifts at a local convenience store, and Jason really didn't want to go and pick Nicholas up, so he told Nicholas to walk the 1.5 miles home. So with no other option, Nicholas started to walk back home, but he mysteriously disappeared after this, and no one would ever see him again. At first, no one seemed to notice that Nicholas was missing, and this was for a few reasons. One reason is that his mom and older brother Jason struggled with substance abuse, and on top of that, Nicholas didn't have a great home life. He was known to be a really troubled kid. He fought with his mom a lot, already had 3 tattoos at 13 years old. He would sometimes threaten his teachers, and it wasn't unusual for him to disappear for a few days at a time. Nicholas was also known to the police, and he already had a record of breaking and entering, stealing, and truancy. And with his mom and older brother using drugs, there were already a lot of domestic violence disturbance calls with the police. They were over at the house quite often, so with all of this combined, Nicholas's mom didn't actually realize that he was missing until 3 days later, which is when she officially reported him missing to the police. And because of the family history, authorities didn't really investigate at first. They kind of just thought that he ran away and would be back in a few days, and no one really seemed to care. His disappearance didn't even get reported in the local news. Police thought that Nicholas may have just ran away because he was scheduled for a court hearing the following week due to his bad behavior, and it was likely that he would have either gone to juvie or be sent off to a group home. So in their minds, this was reason enough to not give this a proper investigation. But this is where the story takes a strange turn that absolutely no one could have expected. 3 months after Nicholas's disappearance, Jason called the police and told them that he just saw Nicholas trying to break into the home's garage, but when he realized he'd been seen, he ran away. When police arrived, they found no evidence that Nicholas was ever there, and soon the case would fall cold. But then, out of the blue, 3 years later, the Barclay family gets a call from authorities in Spain who said that they just found Nicholas in a youth shelter. Now 16, Nicholas told authorities that he'd been kidnapped by high-ranking government officials and forced into human trafficking in Europe. When he somehow escaped, he realized that he was in Spain and called for help. This was obviously devastating to hear that he'd been through all of that, but really the family was just overjoyed that Nicholas was alive. So Nicholas's older sister flew to Spain to pick him up and bring him home, but when she got there, she was a little shocked at what she saw. The Nicholas she remembered was no longer the Nicholas that was standing right in front of her, his appearance had completely changed. Instead of his blonde hair and blue eyes, he now had brown eyes with dark hair and a receding hairline. On top of this, Nicholas now spoke with a European accent, which obviously was not there before, seeing as though he grew up in Texas. Nicholas had an excuse for why everything had changed, though. He said that the people who kidnapped him performed experiments on him that changed the color of his eyes and hair. He then said that he, along with many other kids, were SA'd and forced to learn a new language, which is why he now had an accent. So Nicholas's sister believed him, and she flew back home with him, where he went on to live with the family for 5 months. And despite his new appearance, everyone in the family believed him and welcomed Nicholas home. After his bizarre return home, a local reality TV show caught wind of this insane story and actually got permission to film the family in their home for an upcoming episode. As usual, the team hired a PI to investigate and research his disappearance, but it didn't take long for this PI to become suspicious. He ended up comparing the new Nicholas's ears to an old photo of him and quickly found that they did not match. This is when he notified authorities of what was possibly going on, and when the FBI stepped in 1998, they took Nicholas's fingerprints and DNA, and what they found is honestly chilling. This was not Nicholas. In fact, this was a 23-year-old Frenchman named Frederick Borden, and he was known as a serial imposter. By the time he had assumed Nicholas's identity, he had already impersonated hundreds of children in more than a dozen countries, some of which were real missing kids, just like Nicholas. So Frederick was obviously arrested for this, and he pleaded guilty to passport fraud and perjury. He was sentenced to 6 years in a Texas prison, and once he was released in 2003, he went back to France and went on to assume the identity of another missing boy, 14-year-old Leo Bally, who had been missing since 1996. Of course, DNA eventually proved who he really was, and he was sentenced to 4 months in prison for this crime. It doesn't stop here, though, because in 2005, Frederick went on to assume another young boy's identity. Now he was a 15-year-old boy, and he told everyone that he was a Spanish orphan. He said his parents were killed in a car accident, and he was somehow let into a high school where he spent an entire month. He was able to fool so many people by simply dressing like a teenager, and he trained himself to walk differently and used a ton of anti-aging cream. He even hid his receding hairline by wearing a hat. I seriously don't get how he pulled this off, though, because to me he looks so old. But anyway, he spent an entire month in the school before a teacher saw a TV program about him and what he did. He was then kicked out. When asked why he did this, Frederick said that he's just looking for love and affection because he never received it as a kid. What's crazy is the fact that he went on to get married, although I think they have since separated. But before they did, they had 5 kids together. A true crime documentary was actually made about this called The Imposter, and it is seriously so disturbing. I talked about this on here a few years ago, and I didn't know it at the time, but Frederick had a TikTok account, and my video kind of went viral back then, which he saw. And then he started making reply videos to all of the people commenting from my video. It was honestly really crazy, and I didn't see me and The Imposter having beef on my bingo card. But if he does still have a TikTok, I want to make it clear that I personally don't condone any hate. So if he does, please don't go leaving any bad comments on my behalf. It's hard to remember with the craziness of the story, but Nicholas is still missing. Although we don't know exactly what happened to him, there are a few theories. Theory number 1 is that his family had something to do with it, either on accident or on purpose. He didn't have a great home life, and some think that his older brother could have been involved, but unfortunately we won't ever know, because Jason died a few years later following a drug overdose. It's never been proven if that was intentional or not, but some people think it looks a little suspicious, and maybe he possibly felt guilty or something. Even if he didn't do anything, he did tell Nicholas to just walk home that day, so that had to have been incredibly hard for him to process and deal with. Another theory is that he was met with foul play somehow, and according to his mom, Nicholas would often accept rides from strangers, so it's left her wondering if someone picked him up and then something bad happened after that. And then the last theory is that Nicholas just ran away. This could also be true due to his run-ins with the law so young, and with him not having a great home life. But I feel like this is unlikely because it's been so many years now with not a single clue turning up. If he was alive today, he'd be 44 years old, but it's now been 31 years, and whatever happened to Nicholas that summer night remains a mystery.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman Albert Fish, a slight, elderly man with gray hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This is your warning that if you see tape on your home front door, it means someone's trying to break in. It's called the sticky tape trick, and basically what these thieves will do is put a piece of tape on the keyhole of your front door. I mean, at first you might think that this is just a stupid prank, but it actually is a lot more serious than that. It's a tactic used by thieves to scope houses they're trying to break in and rob. So how this works is that after the tape is placed on the keyhole, they come back a day or a few days later to see if the tape is still intact. then that signals that the owners have not entered the home and most likely no one is in there in that moment, which is obviously what these thieves want. They would much rather enter an empty home and avoid being confronted by someone. Another trick thieves have practiced is sticking FedEx or UPS stickers on the front door, and same thing, if it remained there when they return, then it's a sign that no one is currently in the home. So if you see stickers or tapes or anything weird on your front door, make sure to remove it immediately, and please set up some cameras. The world is such a scary place right now.
I was beheaded for exercising my profession as a teacher. My name is Samuel Paty, and I am a history and geography teacher in France. One day, while carrying out my work as usual, I showed caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad to a class of young students as part of a lesson on freedom of expression. 10 days later, on October 16th, 2020, as I was leaving the school where I work, an 18-year-old man of Chechen origin, Abdullah Abuyedovich Antonov, followed and attacked me. He brutally slit my throat. It was a horrific and unimaginable act of violence. After committing this atrocious act, my assailant took a photo of my lifeless body and shared it on social media. Law enforcement quickly intervened and killed the attacker, but it was already too late for me. My story has become a symbol of the struggle for freedom of expression and education in France. I hope that my sacrifice will contribute to promoting tolerance, mutual respect, and understanding among different cultures and religions.
Won't believe what this man was caught doing with a corpse. 46-year-old Randall Bird was caught doing inappropriate things to a corpse while he was working his shift as a security guard at the Banner University Medical Center in Phoenix. Randall's job was to bring deceased bodies to the hospital's morgue and slip them into the freezer. But during his shift, coworkers walked in on him and caught Randall inside the freezer with his zipper down, his uniform looking messy, and a body bag open. He was seen almost on top of the 79-year-old deceased woman, and when the workers walked in, he quickly tried to cover the body. The workers said that Randall looked so sweaty and nervous when they caught him, and his excuse was that he had a medical emergency and he almost passed out. His co-workers did not believe a single word and reported the incident.
About you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only.
Said that he couldn't remember.
Shout out to King Saul's balls in the building.
After investigators found his DNA on the woman's body, which proves that Randall was in fact doing what we all assumed. He was arrested and now faces multiple charges.
I'm going to prove the Mandela effect right now. Okay, so the Mandela effect is a phenomenon where millions of people remember past events completely differently from how they actually happened. For example, the Monopoly guy. Millions of people remember him having a monocle, but he never did. And if you search it up, you will see that he never did. Next, remember the video of Evan Longoria catching the ball, saving the reporter? But many people remember the reporter being blonde, but as you can tell, she's not. But there are a couple people capturing the Mandela effect on camera using an old phone to kind of see through a parallel dimension, and this is what he recorded from the same video. And as you can see, the reporter is blonde, as we all remembered. Even ChatGPT remembers the reporter being blonde and saying it was actually Emily Austin. This is just chilling, and a popular theory is that the world ended in 2012 and we all got transported to a different but kind of the same dimension. Let me know your thoughts on this because this whole video is just mind-blowing to me.
This mother hired a hitman to take her son's life. 18-year-old Jasmine Pais used the website rentahitman.com to find someone to kill her 3-year-old son. Jasmine provided her address, a picture of her son, and demanded that it happen as soon as possible. But little did she know that this website was fake, and this man who operated the website reported her to police. And before police confronted Jasmine, they posed as the hired hitman, spoke to her, and confirmed the details. Basically, what this does is it makes a stronger case for the prosecution by hearing the words come out straight from Jasmine's mouth. And unknowingly, Jasmine told investigators that she's willing to pay $3,000 for the job to be done. And what's crazy is that when Jasmine was arrested, investigators searched her computer and were shocked when they saw the murder for hire website still open on the screen. But Jasmine wasn't the only one involved in this crime. A month after her arrest, 18-year-old Gamaliel Souza was charged with conspiracy to commit murder after investigators found text messages showing that he pushed Jasmine to take her son's life. He essentially convinced Jasmine that her son was the problem and the reason why they weren't together.
Girl killed her mum and then texted a photo of her body to her dad. In 2013, Rachel Hudson and her family were supposed to be celebrating Thanksgiving at their home in Virginia. However, the holiday would take a horrendously sinister turn. Rachel's mum was terminally ill 58-year-old Susan Lee. Rachel had been her mum's carer since she was just 9 years old. On the evening in question, Rachel and her dad got into an argument. When her dad left the house the next day to make the most of the Black Friday sales, Rachel did something unthinkable. She took a weapon out of the wardrobe and loaded it. She apparently thought about unaliving herself at this point, but she didn't want to put her mum through the trauma of finding her body. She then walked into the room where her mum was and said, "I'm sorry, this is what has to happen." Her mum apparently told her, "You're crazy," and this is the point where Rachel killed her mum. When she texted her dad to break the news to him, he obviously didn't believe what she was saying. She then took a photo of her mum's body and texted it over to her dad. Rachel was sentenced initially to 50 years in prison, but this was reduced to 18 years because of an apparent undiagnosed mental illness.
These are pictures that get worse the longer you look at them, part 2. Up first is this picture, and at first glance, it just looks like 3 friends at a wedding. But if you look closer, you will see something extremely disturbing. Look between the guy's legs in the middle and you will see a disturbing ghostly little girl. This is super creepy, and imagine you see this after taking this photo. Next up is just a normal picture of a living room, right? That is until you look in the bottom left and you see a very disturbing face. The person who took this photo said nothing was there when they took it, and it only showed up after the photo was taken. What in the world is that thing? Next up is a picture of a truck that is completely packed to the brim. But if you look throughout the items, you will see something very weird. In the back of the truck, you can see the head of a little boy peeking out. Next, take a look at this picture of this girl on her bed. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? But if you look to the right of her mouth, you can see the face of a guy looking out. I would immediately use that on my house if I took this photo. Finally is this picture. And promise me, the longer you look at this, the more disturbing it will get. So do me a favor right now and pause the video and let me know what you see in this photo. Because trust me, there's a lot to unpack.
Please be warned that this true crime case is horrific. This little girl was buried alive.
Shout out to Sauce the Boss, of course, man. Who's in the building, man? Shout out to Sauce the Boss, of course, man. Who's in the building, man? Shout out to Sauce the Boss, of course, man. Who's in the building, man? Shout.
What are you talking about? Literally being held captive. Okay?